Hope everybody's having a fantastic day and a fantastic week. I want to welcome everybody to our first webinar from the AI initiative from the 3 Hours Collaborative. This is AI 101 from lab to laptop, and we're going to be talking about AI tools and trends in toxicology. So this first webinar, we're going to get some really basic aspects. So this is for folks that potentially have never used different AI tools, or you're just starting to do that. But as we progress through the webinars, you will see we're going to dive in more and more in depth and also getting more complex. So before we jump into that, I want to, if you're not familiar with the 3 Hours Collaborative, which I would hope everybody at this point is, but if you're not, our mission is to advance better science for both people and animals. And our efforts are really balanced across the 3 Rs. So there are some organizations that focus on, for example, replacement, but for us, we're looking at all of the 3 Rs, so refinement, reduction, and replacement. We have a lot of different efforts within the 3 Rs Collaborative. We have a cultural care, environmental health monitoring. We also have a translational digital biomarkers initiative, obviously an AI initiative. We also have a 3 R certificate course. We'll chat in a second about that. We also have a refinement initiative for mouse handling and non-human primates, and then also an MPS, organ on a chip initiative. So the strategy has really 3 goals: to promote 3 Rs broadly, promote specific 3 R strategies by advancing implementation of high impact, and then also promote our organization by building collaborations and awareness. So also, we're not repeating efforts that maybe other organizations are doing. So I mentioned there is a 3 R certificate course. This is something that the team has been working endlessly on, and it's a fantastic course. If you have not checked it out, highly recommend. It's through Citi, and it's really comprehensive and in-depth, actionable 3 Rs training. And again, it talks about all of the 3 Rs and how they can be implemented and their impact. So just talk about a little bit about the AI initiative if you're not a member of it. So this is a new initiative, one of the latest one within the 3 Rs Collaborative. And our scope is really using predictive and generative AI for risk assessment and safety of drugs, environmental and industrial chemicals. So really grows across all different industries. And that was one of the main reasons for this group to come together to learn how this technology is being implemented and educate across different industries. Our focus is really to facilitate productive interactions between different stakeholders. So again, a lot of aspects, as we know, happen in silos. So we bring everybody together. And I've been very fortunate to be able to co-lead this with Wade Atong, who is here and is going to introduce himself in a little bit. So here are the objectives for the 3 Rs AI initiative. Again, foster collaboration between the stakeholders, identify and address barriers to AI implementation. And one of them that we have identified is training and education about AI, right? So this is our first step here. Teaching you how to use or share how we use AI at a very basic level. And again, we'll get to the more complex levels. We also want to encourage development and appropriate use of AI in safety and risk assessment. And our deliverables are overview paper, which we actually just submitted, I think, a week ago or so. And also we're working on an ethics paper on the use of AI for safety and risk assessment, and also create accessible educational resources, right? So these webinars is just first part of it, and we're going to be developing a lot more. And then coordinate the discussion between all of the different stakeholders, so end users, technology developers, regulatory agencies. So, how to join? So here's, you can scan, I'll take you to the 3 Rs collaborative website, but current members are listed there. The membership now is opened, and also Laura put the chat put the link in the chat there for you so you can reach it that way. But if you have any questions about it, you can reach out to Megan, who's the executive director of the 3 Hours Collaborative, and she'll provide you with more information. But we recently had actually, I think, 15 or 16 applications to join. So again, if you or your group or your organization is not a member, we would highly recommend checking it out. So today, I'm joined by 2 fabulous folks, friends and colleagues, Connie Mitchell and Wei Tong. And then so, Connie, I'm going to kick off with you. If you could just introduce yourself briefly.
Sure, happy to, and thanks for the opportunity. I'm Connie Mitchell. I'm a Senior Scientific Program Manager at the Health and Environmental Sciences Institute. I was asked to speak today, and I will say I'm not an AI expert, but I use the tools a lot. So it's something I'm happy to share my perspective as a project manager working in toxicology on some basic tools that hopefully could help others. Thanks, Shaipan.
Thanks, Connie. Wei.
All right, my name is Wei Tong. I'm from FDA's National Center for Toxicological Research, and I'm a division director here for the bioinformatics and the biostatistics. Now, as our division's name indicated, we are totally in silico divisions, and we're mainly focused on conduct computational work and to support the FDA regulatory applications. And as a division mainly focused on the bioinformatics and the biostatistics, it is not even possible to take a 3-step into our field without using some sort of the AI and the machine learning. So I'm very glad to have this opportunity to interact with each of you and about or to share some of the experience and we have, and particularly and how we use the AI in the regulatory application.
Great, thanks, Wei. And so I also have it labeled their AI tools because I want to mention that the other co-author of this presentation are various tools. So you see some images throughout the slides, and all of that has been done with AI. So just some of the logistics. So for engagement and participation, you can put your questions in chat throughout the webinar as we're addressing the different slides. We will actually hold off to answering the questions until the end because we can get distracted very quickly. But please place them in there, and Lauren is going to keep track of that, and we'll address them at that point. You also, as Lauren already mentioned, will receive a recording of this webinar. And also, one of the things that we did, we want to really continue the conversation here with everybody, and as these webinars progress. And so we thought one of the ways to do that is through a LinkedIn group. So here, and we didn't call it AI initiative because it's such a generic term, and it's really, there's 100 other groups that are like that, right? So here you can scan, or again, it just came up with the title this actually last night, Trust AI, Translation Regulatory Use. But this is where we can continue the conversation and share our tools and also ask different questions. And then also, obviously, you can see the 3 R's AI initiative on the website. All right, so we're here to really demystify AI, and we want to do that together. So again, if you're looking at learning just some of the basics, this is a great webinar for you. If you know actually more and you have been using it, we're looking forward to having your discussion and some of the engagements throughout the webinar also at the end. So, why should we care about AI? I mean, I think these days AI is pretty much everywhere, but also in our field is really changing scientific and regulatory work around the globe. And we're going to give you some of those examples today, but I'm sure you have also seen a lot of with the media, with FDA, and other organizations like NIH and other companies. There's also obviously regulatory engagement, a significant one. And then one of the things that I really like about it is really helps us to improve operations and our efficiencies. Really, you can use it for data review, document drafting. AI can really help you and assist in a lot of different ways. And we'll show you some of those examples. But learning basics now really puts you ahead of the curve because if you don't use AI, other people that are going to actually collaborate with AI, it is going to make them more efficient, more productive. So you're going to kind of be left behind. And really, AI also helps you focus on scientific, on the science and the decisions, and less the busy work, right? So a lot of times we have to search for things and search for papers. So here you can use AI to expand, to make the process more efficient. So what are you going to get from this webinar, right? So we're going to really provide a jargon-free explanation of AI at a very basic level. We're going to provide you with step-by-step live demonstration so you can follow. And then we're going to also give you practical tips for immediate use. So you can literally just take it right after this webinar and start working with it. And then this webinar, but also slides, you can use this as a toolkit of resources that you can also then keep learning from. So what is AI? So at really basic, AI stands for artificial intelligence, not robots taking care of the world. Hopefully they will and help us with that. But here, not robots taking over the world. And you can also think of AI as a super powered assistant that I know I never had. So now I have one and definitely take advantage of that assistant from data correlation, but also help with repetitive and complex tasks. So some of the examples, that we already are using, and maybe if you're not sure, if you didn't know that, the system's already using that for you. So email spam filters, voice assistants, movie recommendations, right, that you get on Netflix, Hulu, or whatever, platform that you watch. So what are large language models, right? We hear this term all the time. And really, those are AI programs trained to understand and write human language. And examples are ChatGPT, Copilot, Gemini, and we'll talk about some other ones. But today, we're going to give you examples from the ChatGPT. That's one of the tools. But again, there's a lot of other ones as well that you can engage depending on what you're doing, what your preference is. So there reads lots of text, book articles, website, and it really learns how to speak and listen like a human. So one of the things that if you use one of these tools, that over time, if you ask it, it will actually start writing from your voice. So it's going to actually understand how you write, and then it's going to end up doing that for you to a certain extent. So the one analogy that I really like is, as an instant librarian. That's what really an LLM is. So imagine a librarian who really has access to all the books, that you didn't have a chance to read, that maybe you have a library, right, that you do want to go through all those, but work, kids, family, whatever gets in the way. But also going, access to all of the articles and different reports. So you can ask them questions and they can find those answers for you very rapidly in plain English, but also in other languages as well, if you speak another language. Really, that's what LLM does for text. The one thing we're not going to talk about today is predictions using AI in that aspect, but we're going to engage with that in our future webinars. I do want to mention publications that we have recently published with WADA, 50 Shades of AI in Regulatory Science. And I definitely give credit to WADA for that title. But it really dives into kind of the assisting intelligence all the way through autonomous intelligence within regulatory space. So it really kind of on a basic aspect really addresses those and explains it how AI is being used in regulatory sciences. So, how can these technologies really help us? So I already mentioned some of those reasons, but one of the biggest thing is summarizing lengthy reports. So even if you have to do it for work, or if you don't have the time to read something, right, you can really rapidly summarize it within seconds. It helps you draft emails and responses. So English is my second language. And so I can use that to really correct them. But also one of the things that I am very typically very forward, and some folks don't appreciate that as much. So I can ask AI to help me draft an email, for example, for somebody that lives in Europe or Asia, and it actually learns and knows how to do that. So my emails don't come across too abrupt when I'm sending them out. and also translating technical information to different audiences. So we'll show you that. One of the examples, right, when you're writing ICOOC protocols is to describe something in lay terms, right? So this is that you can put in scientific explanation and ask it to provide it in lay terminology, and it does a pretty amazing job at that. It can also suggest improvements for clarity or being more concise as well. So, we're going to show you some of the examples, how this works in summarizing, drafting, rewriting, or suggesting improvements. And, we're not going to show you a live version of that, but we're going to show you through the slides. But it really does that in seconds, even in milliseconds. So we'll dive into that. So just from a very basic aspect, how does that work, right? So you're going to give it a prompt, and we'll talk about the prompts a little bit today, but also in the future webinars. But how you prompt, how do you describe your question makes a huge impact on the answers that you get. So we'll show you some of that. It can scan everything it has learned and generates helpful answers. So for example, you can have chats or projects, and within a project, whatever information you have, the system learns within a project, and you don't have to keep referencing it. It already knows that it's there, and it'll use that information in the future answers. And so, like I said, the better your prompt, the better the answer is going to be. So we also recommend really starting small, right? Try a simple task, summarizing a report or drafting an email, and play with it and see what works, what doesn't. And you can also try different tools, ChatGPT and others. Also, just ask for help. You can ask actually ChatGPT for your help to help you, if you're looking for something, but also ask others, right? That's why we're here for you to help with this. And the best way to learn is really experimenting. The prompts and how you do them, that's one of the ways to learn. You just keep prompting, because again, depending what you're looking for, if your area is very niche, maybe not a lot of other people have done that. So that's something that we highly recommend. All right, so now we're going to dive into that demo, and we're going to show you like how to summarize, how to develop an email. And I don't think we're going to be jumping into a bio today, but that's something that also does an amazing job. You can, for example, submit your whole CV or resume and just summarize it into a brief bio. I mean, it's incredible how it does that. And you can then also actually ask to do that for a specific conference or event or even a job, and it'll help you with that. So here's the first step, right? So you end up opening up ChatGPT, and then on the top, on the right there, if you can see my pointer, it's going to ask you, what are you working on? So then here's something that I wrote. Please summarize the following toxicology report for regulatory audience. And then so here, as you can see, I'm not going to read all of this, but that's what I end up typing in. So it's really happy to help you. And here's the report that it did, right? So it gives it a title, and then writes out the report. And as you can see, it's including all of the information that you provided there, right? So it generates that summary. At this stage, you also have to review everything that puts out, right? I'm sure you have maybe seen in media, right, or even on social media that, there are publications and journals that have been published, right? And you see an excerpt from, that it's actually through AI, right? That AI is suggesting to do something, right? So obviously those folks didn't review that text. They just put it into the publication. But you also want to make sure that actually it has included the right information, because it can hallucinate, meaning that add kind of fake or made up information as well, right? So you really need to review it, and then you can also edit it further if necessary. So here's, going along with this report, I want to write a professional email. Like I mentioned, right, that I use this for quite a bit. So again, draft professional email to my colleague, Dr. Lee, summarizing these study findings. And then I have the list of those findings. So again, it's really happy to help you. And it provides a subject, right? I didn't even ask, right? Provide me a subject line, but it does that because it knows we're asking for an email. And then you have, just like an actual email, there would be, and it even puts it in a bulleted format so it's easier to read. And then I didn't ask, right, to put my name on there, but it knows that it's me, right? So it's automatically puts my name on here. So then you can obviously cut and paste that information into your email or anywhere else, right, where you want to put that in. But you also have to review it, right? You definitely want to make sure that it has the right information. Because sometimes, for example, if you work on different projects, it could potentially pull something from another project into that email if you're referencing something similar. So again, that doesn't happen often, but it happens enough, right? And again, it could hallucinate and add something that doesn't make any sense. So again, you still have to review it, right? So having like a human in a loop here with these technologies. So before I pass it over to Connie, I just couldn't help myself with this, right? So I don't even use Google anymore as a search engine, and I forced my kids not to use it either. So I was looking for a restaurant that's near a location where we're going to be meeting. So I place it into Google that you can see on the left-hand side here, right? And it gives me all of these restaurants, right? And none of them are it, right? And so then I put this question into ChatGPT, and it gives me a list of restaurants, and one of those is the one that I wanted to actually go to, right? So again, the prompt here was deli near Generation Bio in Cambridge, right? So here, because I didn't provide the address and etc., it gives you all of these restaurants in Cambridge area, right? Which I could care less about. But here with this basic prompt, it gives you those restaurants that are near Generation Bio. So anyway, it really simplifies things, I think, from my perspective. And there's a lot of different uses for it. So with that said, so I guess I also want to mention, right, that we're going to talk about ChatGPT. But so, for example, for me, I end up working with, a lot of different tools. But the 5 ones that I use pretty much on a daily basis are here. So you have Claude, and I actually misspelled that. It's CLAUDE. And that's actually, I didn't misspell it. When I asked for an image, the AI actually misspelled it, right? So here it's hallucinating. So here's a good example. Then, so I use ChatGPT, Gemini, DeepSeek, and Perplexity. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to our next, I was going to say next fantastic speaker. I'm not saying that I'm fantastic, but so our next fantastic speaker, Connie.
Thanks, Shaipan. And Shaipan, if you or Wida have any other things to chime in with, we had a really good conversation Monday, so please feel free to. But kind of picking up from the conversation, I was thinking about what do I use it for? And daily use that, again, as Shaipan said, it's kind of like an assistant. So wordsmithing's one, if you're really trying to write something technical and there's a lot of jargon, or it becomes a sentence that's the size of a paragraph, sometimes it's really useful to help divide it up and make it sound more like in your voice, especially, as said before, if you give it other information. It can be good for quick data visualization, and I'll show some of that later. Sometimes document formatting, if you have to do something in Excel, like combining 2 columns, that can be really time consuming. People who know how to code, it might be easier, but for me, it's been nice to put it in there and get a quick output that, again, you still have to check it and make sure it's correct. We already talked about summarizing manuscripts and emails. I'll show some examples of that with Notebook. A lot of what I do, I manage expert groups related to toxicology. So sometimes we have, in-person workshops. So if I give it info on what's the topic, what's the scope, is it a lot of breakout groups? Sometimes it can be really helpful for drafting an agenda. Or what might be more time consuming is, this speaker can't talk at 10 a.m. anymore. We're going to move them to 2 and I have to rearrange my whole agenda. It's very good about doing that in something that might take me 10, 15 minutes and make sure all the times are correct still. Sometimes, this will be true for coding as well, but you could ask it for step-by-step instructions for things. So you're trying to do something in Excel, it's not working, you can't find the right tutorial, so you could look there. And then one thing I found it really useful is if I'm working with something like EndNote and I'm on a website, you usually have to manually create a reference for it. If you put it in ChatGPT, ask it to make you an EndNote file or a RIS file, it'll often do it for you. Again, you still have to check, make sure the year's right, the author's right, but it's been really helpful. So next slide, I'll show some examples. There we go. Oh, and we touched on this a little bit, and maybe we're going to go through it on future meetings, but prompt engineering is really important. And it's kind of like with people, right? It's how you ask the question. If you're really vague, you'll probably get a vague answer back. So giving more details and context can save times or decrease the number of times you have to run it. I know Shaipan said earlier that he has, a really long prompt, and sometimes it tells it not to use particular words or do particular things. Sometimes it learns if you work with the same one. Sometimes it feels like it doesn't. You can also use it to describe your audience. So Shaipan showed that as well. I'll show some examples, in layperson terms to a high schooler, to a regulator. You can really change it. Again, you still have to check it. I find, and we'll show that sometimes it overstates things. So again, it's a tool, it's a first pass, it's a draft to iterate with. A lot of times doing it step by step is usually more useful. So this could be in one big prompt, or it could be in something you divide up and again, iterate on. But sometimes it gets stuck. Like if you ask it to do 3 things with an Excel document, it might either time out or might just not work. So sometimes it's better to break it up into pieces. Okay, next slide. All right, I'm going to walk through using this research paper. This is a few years ago, but it's something I know well because it's from my grad school work. So this will just illustrate a few examples. So go ahead, next slide. And so what if I'm using this work and I'm submitting it to a scientific conference, but the conference submission site only has 200 words. So I know the text on here is small, but you could use it to help decrease the word count of an abstract. So this is something, could you please shorten the abstract to no more than 200 words while retaining the meaning? So it's 236 currently. Okay, next slide. Here, now it did 152. So, what I did is read through, make sure the main points are still there. But one thing is, that's actually kind of a lot shorter than I wanted. I told it 200, so I ended up iterating again. So go ahead, next slide. Okay, and now it did it one more time, and this is closer. So it says 199 words total. I did copy and paste it into Word, and Word said 196. So that might be some differences of, dashes or different things in parentheses, but there was a difference. So that's at least worth noting. The other thing, and I yell at it all the time for doing this and doesn't seem to remember, is the M dashes. And so there's debate about this, but what I find, or I'm suspect of, is that's a sign of using AI, which again, it's a tool, it's not a big deal, but you always worry that someone's not actually writing to you, they're just using AI. So those dashes, so I usually tell it to redo it and not use those, or I take them out just because I find that's a sign of using AI. I know there's also particular words that, as ChatGPT has gotten more popular, have skyrocketed either in news or in scientific text. So there's certain words that you may want to avoid just because they come up more in AI if you don't want it to be so obvious that you used it. Again, it's a tool, but some people don't want to seem like they're not doing their work. Okay, next slide. Yeah, and someone asked if we listed those words. I don't have them offhand. I know Shaipan's willing to share some of those. That might be something what are the most common words? I know there's like New York Times articles on them. Okay, so here's some results in different contexts. So I asked, okay, what would be a 1-sentence summary for this abstract for someone who's maybe a scientist, but not a toxicologist? And again, this paper, again, it's just for an illustrative example, but it looked at a flame retardant in zebrafish embryos. So it says this study shows that flame retardant triphenyl phosphate disrupts heart development in zebrafish embryos by interfering with pathways, particularly RXR, without directly binding. So that's pretty good. I think a scientist could understand that. But what if I'm, an academic and I'm trying to explain to my congressperson why we should keep funding, NIH and different things. So why is this important? So I asked it again, could you do a 1-sentence summary to my congressperson? And so it says, this research shows that a widely used flame retardant can interfere with early heart development, highlighting the need for stronger safety evaluations of the chemical that may affect human health. And this is something that I would probably iterate a few more times on. I think that's a little bit of an overstatement. You all as scientists will know nuances with new approach methods of, it's a zebrafish, it's a little different. So that's something I probably wouldn't take that exact one, but it's a nice place to start. Okay, next slide. And then I also asked it to make a graphical abstract. And this is one I didn't iterate on. If I was going to do this, for a publication, I would a few times. But I basically, gave it the abstract. I didn't even give it the paper, and this is what it came up with. I'd say it's not bad. I think there's a lot of things in here that are factually okay, but I did try and highlight what's wrong. So it didn't give the right chemical structure. It just had some kind of different one. It cuts out on the left side, so that's not a copy and paste issue into PowerPoint. That's what it came out of. So I would need to ask it to redo it. A lot of the content again was okay. I don't know, the zebrafish embryo looked a bit weird. I'd probably ask it to do it again. But overall, it was fine. So I think this is a nice use of the tool of, here's what you get without a ton of details, just asking it to make a graphical abstract, but you probably need to go back a few times to actually get what you want. Okay, next slide.
So for this one, I just wanted to comment, Connie, that when using the images with different tools, sometimes when you ask to just change one minor thing, it changes a lot of other things because it reproduces the whole image. So that can be very, very frustrating. I use these 4 different tools almost on a daily basis for images. But the one thing that's not listed on here is Claude. So Claude AI, as you can see on the right-hand side, I made this dancing robot this morning. But if I want to change, for example, the color blue to yellow, if I put that into like ChatGPT, it's going to probably change other things in the image as well. But with Claude, as you can see on the bottom here, it doesn't draw images. It provides code, and the code shows up as an image. So then you can go back and ask. You don't have to know how to code, right? You just see the code, but you can ask Claude AI to now just change the color, from blue to yellow, and that's the only thing it's going to change. So again, you can really be very specific here, where with the other image tools, at least like ChatGPT, for example, or for example, like the ones here, like Midjourney, that's not going to be the case. So again, depending what you're using for, it's going to depend on the tools that you should select.
Thanks, Shapon. So continuing with that paper as an example, I also wanted to show Notebook LM. This is from Google, and it's something I'm beginning to explore, but it has some nice other features that I haven't seen in ChatGPT yet. So next slide. Okay, so this is what it looks like, and you can upload a PDF. So before I was really just working with the abstract, but here I did give it the whole PDF, so it has more information. And again, I know it's small, but this is just illustrative. Part of the example here is that I didn't ask it to do that. I just came up with a summary, and it had a little broken heart. So I thought that was interesting. Next slide. And one thing I did ask it, since I gave it the whole paper, and this is something, if you're reading a paper and can't find a particular detail, it might be able to help you do it. So I asked, what was the highest concentration tested? So it went through and pulled, and it was 40 millimolars of the compound. And then it also gave some details about, okay, that was in the range finding, but what about in the ligand screen or the sequencing? So it did pull out what the different ones, and they were, as far as I read, correct. The other thing here, and we're not going to demo it, but just to let folks know that if you're interested in a paper, one thing you can do is put it here, and it'll give you a podcast. And this is something, it's supposed to be more conversational. It'll be 2 speakers, usually sounding like a male and a female, and they'll go back and forth and discuss the paper. And so I listened to a few minutes of it. Again, it's something to review for being factual, but it's something nice, like if you don't have time to sit at your desk or need a few minutes to get up and want to look at a paper, it could be good. Or if it's maybe outside your field, this might be a nice way to get an introduction to key points. Again, I think here, as scientists, it's always hard to make something in layperson's term and keep the nuance. So that's probably something to look out for. But I think it would be a nice starting point. Okay, next slide. All right, I wanted to show, so not with that paper anymore, but with some things I do in my daily task, some data we've generated as part of a project for HESI. So data analysis and visualization. And one thing when I was talking with Shaipan and Rita on Monday to highlight, and I think someone had a question about it, like what about the different levels of access? So we actually do have a subscription for HESI. So it has that text at the bottom. It can make mistakes. And then it also says that OpenAI doesn't use HESI workspace data to train its models. So we at HESI try and make everything publicly available eventually, but this is good that, while we're working with the data, it's not just training on it. And this is probably important for, companies that don't want their data trained on that, but still want to use these questions. So I think it's important to look and see what subscription you have, but that can also give you different answers and, what's available. And I don't know that we'll go into it too much today, but, even with just in ChatGPT, there are different models available. Some are better for others, like quick task, and then some are, supposed to be better for like data analysis. I typically just use whatever it defaults to unless it's making a lot of mistakes. Okay, next slide.
And so Connie, I just wanted to add, right? So,
Yeah.
So if you're working, for example, at a pharmaceutical company and they have ChatGPT and allow you to use it, they have that space just like HESI has here, right? So as an individual, they actually now also, before you had to, it was just enterprise level and that's it. But now, for example, for like ChatGPT, you can actually, as an individual, it costs more, but you can actually have that space as well. So for example, for me, some of the daily aspects, right, that I use that doesn't interact with clients' data end up utilizing just the, the open ChatGPT and other tools. But if I am going to use, for example, data, making sure one that, the collaborators I work with are aware of it, but then you have this separate safe space that's protected. So I just wanted to add that. And the other part also that Connie already mentioned, right, that depending on your subscription level, so if for like ChatGPT, you can have it at $20 per month or $200 per month. And there's actually pretty significant difference. For me, what I found is that $20 per month, it hallucinates quite a bit, for example, when you ask for references. But at the $200 level, it very rarely hallucinates, if at all. So again, it kind of also brings up, what level you're using. And we won't touch it here, but also brings up the social economics and access, right, to AI and data. But again, that could be, a whole day of discussion, so we won't do that. So I just wanted to add, that depending on what you're using and how you're using, and that question about privacy that came up in the chat, there are solutions for that.
So while we are on this, Connie, sorry about that. And while we're on this subject, then there is a questions on the chat and sort of the relevant to what we just discussed about the confidential informations. And even in the free version, and there is a button on the top right, you can toggle. It says all these conversations going to be temporary, and you can ask ChatGPT, don't include this conversation in their training models. And also you can get into the setting and to remove all the conversations you have ever with the ChatGPT and asking, don't include this information in the training process. Now, I'm not sure how OpenAI and honor that kind of agreement, but at least there is an option so you can click. And the reason I know that because I was trying to asking ChatGPT to how the one big beautiful bill going to impact me personally. So in this conversation, I need to provide a lot of the personal information to get a more realistic assessment, because that bill is big, right? You cannot even read through, and I don't understand how it was relevant to me. And so that you do have an option for that, but I'm not sure whether other larger language models has the similar setting, but you certainly can explore if you, for example, you decide to using the Cloudy or using the Llama models, and then you will be able to. You need to take a look at it.
Yeah, thanks for those comments. I think it's important to address. One thing I wanted to mention is I only gave it the Excel folder here. So I didn't tell it the study details. I didn't tell it, how the cells were exposed. This is an in vitro study that was done by a collaborator. So here, basically, it was looking at LDH release in primary human cells. So I asked it to graph it for one particular substance that we're interested in our botanical project. So it popped this up really quickly. And sometimes it's nice to just get a feel for your data. This is, again, an example of where you should iterate. So here, it's harder to see, but a lot of times we use half logs in a lot of testing. So it didn't do that. So you see the points on the left look a lot more bunched together. It has the error bars, which are huge here, which might be a good way to actually check your data, but sometimes it's a little distracting. And we also had another data type in this folder. So I ended up, yeah, I think it's perfect. I iterated a few times. I asked it to space the concentrations out more linear, to use that log fold or half log to look better. I asked it to plot both. And I think I asked it to get rid of the error bars just so I could get a quick visualization. So again, this is kind of a quick and dirty. It was nice for me. It's usually something, again, you have to go back and forth on. And I like what Shaitan said earlier, sometimes if you ask it to do it once, and then you come back a few days later and ask it to do it again, I find sometimes it's hard for the program or what time of day or how many users are on. And it might be because it's trying to regenerate the graph each time. It's not just making small changes as we might in like Excel. Okay, next slide. All right, so data interpretation. So again, this is just illustrative data. I gave it, one substance in the data points across two endpoints in that assay. So I asked it to give a one paragraph summary. So again, I didn't give it study details, but it came up with a few things, and it might have been some of the metadata in the Excel sheet, but it said it's dose-dependent cytotoxin liver cells. We had increasing LDH, and it told me a little bit about LDH. This is another thing where in prompt engineering, you might want to say, hey, only talk about what I gave you. Don't talk about what's out on the internet. Here, I didn't give it a lot of bounds. So, it looked up what LDH is and told me about it in this summary. Same with MTT vitability. So it talked about what that is, and it talked about how it responded. So it said it's consistent pattern of hepatotoxicity with membrane issues. So, this is something that I think it's fine as a first step. I think we, as toxicologists with an in vitro study, you wonder, especially about that last sentence, like may pose a risk to liver health. Well, it's two kind of cytotox assays in vitro, so does it? So I usually have to tell it not to overstate things. But again, this is fine as a first pass. So next slide.
Connie, can I make a quick comment? This is very interesting and examples. And because I tried once, I make the figures. I thought it's very clear to myself. I thought clear to everyone. And then I asked the ChatGPT to summarize what see from this graph. And the explanation come back, it was not really what I intended to communicate. So what I'm trying to say is you can use the ChatGPT as a sort of the second people to look at the graph, see whether the intended information you try to communicate will be communicated and correctly. I think that's going to be very helpful. And then I was go back and forth a couple of times and change the graph a little bit, and the legend and all of that. And when every time you change it, and that looks like the interpretation become much more clear to the user. So I think that's the one way you can use the ChatGPT or other type of the GPT type of the tools.
Yeah, that's a good point, Lita. If you've made a graph and it's clear to you, but ChatGPT can understand it, it might be that other people can't. So that's a nice way to iterate as well. So here I asked it to describe it. And one thing, I was talking to one of our HESI board members a few months ago, and she said that she gives it a ton of detail. She'll say, I'm an ecotoxicologist at this company, and I'm analyzing this data for this. So again, it's that art of prompt engineering of how many details you give it. And sometimes, if you're vague in, vague out. So here I would say this is, a medium to low level of detail, but saying you're a toxicologist at a contract research lab for chemical testing. You have to communicate these results to a client that has that scientific background, but not an expert in that endpoint or how to interpret. And I do see Laura's question in the chat. So how do you tell it? I don't know if there's, this is me playing around. There might be a better way to do it. But one thing I say here is how would you explain these results in kratom while not overstating the meaning in humans? So I didn't emphasize, hey, this is in vitro. I just said that. Again, it's sort of, at least for me, an art, not a science, and seeing what you get out. And if you have to go back again on, is it, again, making a bigger deal out of what you get. And here we didn't do statistics. It was just like quick and dirty. So again, trying to not oversell what you're getting. And, that's the science communication back to that, as a person too, and working with these tools. So here, I'm not going to read line by line, but it gave this paragraph, it talked about LDH levels increased and cell viability decreased with rising concentrations. It suggests that at higher doses that the substance might compromise both membrane integrity and metabolism. But then it gave a paragraph on it does not predict toxicity directly, but gives an early indicator. It doesn't account for metabolic processing, which there are some in these cells, but again, I didn't give it a ton of details on what the cells are, immune responses, other things. So I think that's fine. I mean, I think there's other things that we as scientists could think about in vitro versus in vivo, like with ADME. But I think, again, this is a good first start in, if I really was in that CRO trying to explain it there. Okay, next slide. And then I asked it to, what are some potential limitations of the study? So it gave me this list of observation and potential issues. Another thing, again, if you don't give it a lot of details, one thing I find it likes to do these lists and bullets. Sometimes, if I'm writing too, I might go back and say, hey, only give it to me in prose, don't bold things, don't do it this way, don't give me a list. So again, it's kind of what your purpose is, what you're trying to use it for. But I think for just understanding here, it was a nice explanation. So I don't know that I'll go through too much here, but it had some information like, hey, you didn't give me controls in this study, so it didn't flag them. That would help understand thresholds. But it gave kind of a nice overview and gave some information on doses and the variability in LDH. That's my last slide. Maybe I have one more. No, that's it. I think I'm back to Shayvon.
Yep. No, that's it. All right. So, and then so just to, there's a couple of questions, right? So one we already kind of addressed from Laura. How do you tell it to not overstate? So for me, what I can share, right, you can just say actually not overstate in this area, and that will work. But one of the things that if you're just starting to prompt, right, you can actually say, you are a prompt engineer and develop a prompt for this, and then you can actually just spill whatever you put in there, and you'll see that actually the prompt that it provides you, it's very well organized, and from that you can see does it actually what kind of terminology to use. So initially when I was just learning, I used that quite a bit, and I still use it. One of the things that I would highly suggest is actually have a document where you actually put your prompts in, because as you evolve prompting over time, instead of then remembering, hey, what did I prompt the last time for this, you can just kind of paste that information in there, and that makes things a lot simpler and easier, and also allows you to learn, because there's some really tiny caveats that you can change, and it will give you different answers. And I think so. There was another question, how do we know that ChatGPT understanding is representative of actual users? We are incentivized to write to satisfy ChatGPT, but how do we ensure that the changes it wants us to make are actually better? So I don't know, Connie, Wada, do you guys want to jump in and have some thoughts?
Yeah, I saw this question. It makes sense, right? And so is that ChatGPT understand what I'm trying to say? It is represent everyone going to understand the graph going to going to be a representative. So in my case, I only can speak on my user experience. In my case, and I do make the judgment and see whether the graph is improved or not. And sometimes in the work I'm doing, and I've been more familiar with, and I understand that this is the way to represent results. Indeed, is better than the original, the one I presented to the ChatGPT. So if you're looking for objective way to assess, that's probably is a little bit more difficult, and this is more subjective.
Connie?
I think it's a fair question, like maybe a scientist would understand the graph, but ChatGPT doesn't. I think that's where you still have to rely on colleagues and your own judgment, maybe similar to what Guido was saying. So I don't think there's a perfect answer. I do think all of this is still an art.
Yeah, and just to add, right, is also the prompting, right? So when you, for a specific audience, the more detail you add, but it's not too much, right? Because if your prompt is too long, ChatGPT gets confused. So then you need to, or not just ChatGPT, but others as well. So you want to really keep it, usually at most, right, about 600 or so characters. But as the more specific you are, the more the easier it is, right, for these tools to understand that. But like both like Kanye and Wade said, right, you still have to have the human in the loop and understand it. And I think that's one of the big challenges, right? The folks that don't work in a specific area, but they'll, put different things into ChatGPT and they want to use it later on, right? Like they're experts in that area, right? So then very rapidly you'll find out, right, that like some of the posts on LinkedIn, at least I see, but I'm sure others as well, right, that somebody posts and it's very clear, right, that they're not an expert in this area and it was made by AI because there are some minor but pretty significant errors in it. So it is kind of going back and forth and getting a better understanding of the field and the technology. So some of the limitations, we kind of already mentioned. But sometimes it really invents facts, right? So it's called hallucinations. One of the ways to address that, what I found is that at least when I work with Claude and ChatGPT, and even at that higher subscription level, when I ask for references, what I found is that I actually ask in a prompt to check the reference, make sure it's real 3 times. If I make it 2 times, it wasn't sufficient. If I made it 4, there was no really difference between 3 and 4, right? So, and one of the things to kind of brings it up, which we won't talk about here, is really the impact on these technologies on environment, right? So, for example, if I ask something to check 3 times or 4 times, the 1 time, it actually uses energy and etc., right? So that's one of the things I ended up now actually paying attention, that even when I do my prompts, I don't use terms like that or a, because it has to read that and it's extra power that it needs for it, right? So again, we won't talk about that here, but it's something that we are aware of and we are definitely thinking about. So it doesn't know your confidential info unless you share it, right? So, we kind of talked about that. Wade said, that he said, this is a private conversation, and not all of the tools allow you to do that. It also may struggle with very new or highly specialized topics. So one example that I use, that when we're asking ChatGPT about preclinical digital measures, very often it gives you information about clinical digital measures. So you really have to be very specific with your prompt and use also terminology like preclinical and non-clinical, and really specify that you want information on preclinical side. And even then, very often it kind of overlaps. So there's definitely some areas where ChatGPT, still really struggles. And so here I have Connie's and Wade's images just to remind me, because I get sometimes too excited that I want them to comment as well on some of the limitations that they have noticed beyond already what we talked about.
Connie, do you have any comments? The hallucination, my feeling always mixed when I saw this word hallucinations, because that's really emphasized the negative part of the large language models, and sometimes they provide information is not factual, and that's true. But hallucination, and also a step away from the innovation as well. So sometimes you really depends on the questions and you are asking, and depends on what specific the the results you're looking for. Sometimes it is pointed in new directions, so you might need to take a close look. So I just want to point that out, and sometimes, hallucination, have any hallucination? Yes, of course. And but is all the hallucination is bad? Maybe not. So that's just my taking and for this. And also we have several questions on the chat, and I'm not sure whether we are going to address these questions or just go on to the some of the materials we were going to share.
Yeah, I think so. So maybe I'll just jump because we have a few more slides just very quickly, and we'll get to the questions, right? Because that's the most important part. So then also some of the tips.
Sorry, Chapon, I'll just kind of jump in just so you know for timing. I will say you answered kind of the majority that are in the chat right now, just so that you know.
Yeah. All right, great. Okay, so that's fantastic. So some of the tips for using AI, right? So be clear, specific prompts. Review your output. We talked about that quite a bit. And really think of AI as your first tool, a draft tool, really. And really just experiment with it, right? Experiment with different tools. Like I said, I use different AI tools because for different writings, different topics, I find that one is better than the other. And also, it's an assistant. It's not a replacement, right? So it can boost your productivity, but it will not replace your expertise, especially when it's niche expertise and your judgment and especially regulatory knowledge. So really the human and AI is a team that's most effective. But if you're not using AI moving forward, I think it's going to be really challenging for you. And it's here to help, right? So even if you didn't notice, right, AI autocorrects your text messages. It helps you with online shopping. It gives you, if you use Google Maps or any other of the platforms, automatic photo sorting on your phones. This is some of the examples of AI. So really the final takeaways that we'd like for you to have from here is that AI and LLMs can really save you time and effort. It's smart, experiment, and keep learning with it. So start small with it. And then also, again, combining the AI with human in a loop gives you better results. So I don't know if there's additional questions there that we didn't ask or we didn't answer yet.
So there is one question about AI agent, and then I want to hear a little bit more. Of course, in this webinar, we won't have enough time to cover these topics. We certainly be able to set up the separate webinar, dive into the AI agents. Actually, this is probably the most important development in 2025 in the area of the AI.
No, definitely. So thanks for mentioning it, Wada. And then so we can definitely address that because I know we have about a minute left and some of the questions here. But with all of that, what I actually want to mention that one, just giving you some homework. Try using ChatGPT or another tool for one of the tasks at work if you can, or even at home. Like I said, for finding a restaurant or whatever it would be. But some of the questions that are here and some of the resources we'll also share, obviously, by email. But if you want to scan this and join us on LinkedIn, we'll continue the conversation there as well. And we can share some additional information and engagement there. So again, if you want to scan this, and if not, we'll include that in a follow-up email. But a lot of the questions that you have here, like even for papers that you just mentioned, Laura had, we'll bring those up in there as well for conversation. So if you want to get involved with 3R's collaborative and hear about our initiative, but there's obviously other ones. Again, you can scan here, but if you search for 3R's collaborative, you'll find it. So we hope that if you're not a member, that you'll join us as a member. So again, I want to really thank Lauren for managing this and organizing for us. And 3R's obviously collaborative for hosting it, but more importantly, Connie and Wada for taking their time and joining us in this webinar and sharing their expertise and knowledge about that. So with that, I don't know if Connie and Wada, you guys have some closing remarks.
Really
I'm good.
appreciate the opportunity. I think I've learned things and people in the chat have given good information. I really like Victor's comments. So just really nice forum. We can all learn together.
Very much looking forward for the future interaction.
All right. Well, thank you so much, everybody. I hope you have a fantastic rest of the day and an awesome week. Thank you so much.